Karen Pemberton is demanding that 3 police officers arrest my wife, a decorated combat veteran, for the crime of standing on our own property in her military dress uniform. I don't care what fake medals she's wearing, Karen shrieks at the officers, her face twisted with rage. She's violating my township ordinances, and I want her in handcuffs right now. The morning dew catches the sunlight on Trish's polished boots as she stands perfectly still, shoulders back, while this lunatic demands her arrest. Then Police Sergeant Martinez spots the silver star on my wife's chest, the medal she earned pulling wounded soldiers from a burning vehicle in Afghanistan. His jaw drops. Without a word, he snaps to attention and renders a crisp military salute. The other 2 officers immediately follow suit, the crunch of their boots on gravel echoing in the sudden silence. Karen's smugness evaporates. Her mouth falls open. She actually stumbles backward as the reality hits her. She just called a war hero's medals fake in front of 3 cops who are now showing my wife the respect she's earned and deserved. What would you do if some HOA psycho tried to have your veteran spouse arrested on your own land? Drop a flag emoji if you're watching from a military town. This story gets so much better. Let me back up and tell you how we got to this insane moment. My name's Jake Rothschild, and 6 months ago, my wife Trish and I thought we'd finally found paradise. After 20 years of Army life, living in base housing where some sergeant could inspect your closets and tell you what color flowers you could plant, we were ready for actual freedom. Trish had just retired as a lieutenant colonel after 2 decades of service, including 3 combat deployments where she earned a Silver Star and Bronze Star. Me? I'm a federal IT contractor who can work from anywhere, as long as I've got decent internet and strong coffee. The irony of surviving Afghanistan only to face suburban warfare wasn't lost on us yet. We found this perfect 1970s ranch house on 3 wooded acres in Millbrook Township, Pennsylvania. The best part? It was specifically outside the Pinecrest Hills HOA boundaries. I'm talking research that would make a Pentagon analyst proud. County records, property surveys, legal descriptions, the whole 9 yards. We even paid a $15,000 premium for this freedom, because after years of military regulations, we'd rather eat ramen for a year than let some civilian Karen dictate our landscaping choices. The house needed work, harvest gold appliances that probably witnessed Nixon's resignation, wood paneling screaming 1975, but it sat on gorgeous wooded land. Trish was already planning her wildflower garden, talking about finally planting native honeysuckle and letting part of the yard go natural. I was eyeing the detached garage for my workshop, dreaming of weekend projects without inspection schedules. Then the welcome wagon from hell arrived. 3 days after moving in, this pristine white Lexus SUV rolls up our gravel driveway like it owns the place. The morning air smells like pine needles and fresh mulch from Trish's new garden beds, but that peaceful atmosphere is about to get nuked. Out steps Karen Pemberton, 58, and I swear the birds actually stopped singing. She's got that weaponized Karen haircut, short, angular, designed for maximum intimidation, and she's carrying a leather portfolio like she's conducting a hostile corporate takeover on my front porch. Her vanilla perfume hits me from 10 feet away, so cloying it makes my eyes water. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she announces. But there's zero warmth. It sounds like a sheriff reading charges. She's wearing a crisp white blazer, and her leather purse squeaks with military precision as she marches up my steps. Here's where it gets good. Karen launches into this PowerPoint-worthy presentation about community standards and property values, sliding official HOA enrollment forms across my patio table like she's serving a warrant. She mentions she's been HOA president for 8 years, self-appointed I later learned, and has successfully brought 3 other non-HOA properties into compliance. "Now, your property technically falls outside our current boundaries," she says with a smile that could freeze hell, "but it certainly affects our visual standards. For the good of the community, we need you to join." I explained politely that we researched extensively and specifically bought outside HOA limits. Not interested, thanks anyway. That's when the mask comes off completely. "We'll see about that," Karen hisses, her voice dropping to Arctic temperatures. "My husband, Doug, is township code enforcement, and I have excellent relationships at the township office. I'm confident we can help you understand how important community cooperation really is." Then she does something that still makes my blood boil. She starts photographing our property with her phone right in front of us, like she's documenting evidence at a crime scene. The metallic click of her phone camera sounds like a gun cocking in the morning silence. "The Henderson family used to live where the Johnsons are now. she says casually while snapping pictures. They thought they could ignore community standards too. Amazing how many code violations Doug discovered on their property. They joined the HOA within 6 months and sold soon after. Much better for everyone. As her Lexus crunches back down our driveway, Trish looks at me and says, "You know what, honey? I didn't survive 3 tours in Afghanistan to come home and get bullied by some suburban dictator with a clipboard." Famous last words. We thought Karen was just another annoying neighbor. We had no idea we'd just declared war on a domestic terrorist with an HOA charter. Karen wasted exactly 0 time declaring war. 5 days after her welcome visit, a township vehicle pulls into our driveway at precisely 8 a.m. like some kind of bureaucratic invasion. Out steps Doug Pemberton, Karen's husband and apparently the muscle in this suburban protection racket, carrying a clipboard that's seen more action than a combat medic's field kit. Doug's about 55, built like a guy who peaked in high school football and has been coasting on that glory for 3 decades. He's got the dead, soulless eyes of a man who spent 20 years writing citations for grass that's a 1/4 inch too tall. The coffee stains on his clipboard tell me this isn't his first harassment rodeo before 9 a.m. "Morning, folks," he mumbles, avoiding eye contact like a guilty teenager. "Got an anonymous complaint about unpermitted structures on your property. Gonna need to do a full inspection." The metallic clang of his measuring tape hitting the concrete sounds like a bell signaling round one of this bureaucratic boxing match. He's targeting my tool shed, a perfectly legitimate 10x12 structure that's been standing longer than some marriages. Doug circles it like a shark smelling blood, measuring every angle twice and photographing it from positions that would make a crime scene photographer jealous. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust from his idling truck mingles with the sweet honeysuckle scent from Trish's garden, creating this surreal contrast between natural beauty and municipal intimidation. Here comes the mini twist that makes Doug's day go sideways. I emerge from the house carrying a manila folder thicker than a George R.R. Martin novel. Every permit, every inspection certificate, every piece of documentation about that shed dating back to when Clinton was president. Doug's confident smirk evaporates faster than morning dew in August. "Everything appears to be in order," he admits, sounding like he just swallowed a live toad. But Karen's enforcement arm isn't ready to retreat. Doug spends another 20 minutes wandering our property like a desperate prospector searching for gold, the gravel crunching under his steel-toe boots with each increasingly frantic step. Finally, he spots his target, Trish's wildflower meadow. This gorgeous section where she's letting native plants grow naturally instead of maintaining the sterile suburban lawn monoculture that apparently defines American freedom in Karen's world. This area constitutes overgrown vegetation in violation of Township Ordinance 247B, Doug announces, pointing with his pen like he's identified a biological weapon. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a combat knife. My wife defended America's freedom overseas, and now some clipboard commando is citing her for growing actual American wildflowers on American soil. Doug hands me a citation with a 30-day compliance deadline, backing toward his truck like he's expecting return fire. "Need this area mowed and maintained according to township standards," he says, engine already running for his tactical retreat. That's when Jake Rothschild, mild-mannered IT contractor, transforms into Jake Rothschild, public records ninja. I spend that evening diving into Doug's employment history like I'm debugging mission-critical server code. Here's your knowledge nugget. Pennsylvania's right-to-know law makes every municipal employee's disciplinary record completely public. You just have to file the proper request and wait the required 5 business days. Doug Pemberton's greatest hits include 3 formal complaints for selective enforcement practices, 2 written warnings for conducting personal business during work hours, and 1 suspension for improper inspection procedures. This guy's got more red flags than a Soviet parade. Always research your local enforcement officers before they investigate you. Their disciplinary records often reveal everything you need to know about their motivations and weaknesses. Armed with this intelligence, I file a formal complaint with Township Supervisor Tom Bradley, complete with photos, timestamps, and audio recordings. Pennsylvania's one-party consent law means I can record any conversation I'm part of. A beautiful thing when dealing with municipal bullies. Karen's reaction arrives at 9:03 p.m. via unhinged phone call. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she shrieks so loudly I have to hold the phone away from my ear. "I've been running this neighborhood for 8 years, and I know exactly how to deal with troublemakers like you." Interesting, I say calmly, making sure my voice recorder app is capturing every syllable. Are you threatening us, Karen? Click. She hangs up faster than a prank caller caught by caller ID, but our HOA overlord is just warming up her engines. The next morning brings Karen's new surveillance campaign, daily drive-bys in her white Lexus, photographing our property from the public road like some kind of suburban paparazzi with a persecution complex. She cruises past at 7 a.m., noon, and 6 p.m. with military precision that would impress an actual military officer. Mrs. Olivia, our sweet elderly neighbor who lives blessedly outside HOA jurisdiction, delivers the intelligence that changes everything. You're her fourth target in 2 years. She's perfected this system. We weren't dealing with an annoying neighbor. We were facing a domestic terrorist with an HOA charter and a systematic campaign of legal harassment. Game on, Karen. Karen's next assault proved she wasn't just vindictive. She was a tactical genius of suburban warfare. 2 weeks after Doug's inspection debacle, she launched a full-scale bureaucratic blitzkrieg at the monthly township meeting that would make a military strategist weep with admiration. The normally sleepy Millbrook Township Hall, which usually hosted maybe 12 retirees arguing about pothole budgets, suddenly swarmed with 30 HOA residents wearing matching Community Standards Matter buttons. These people looked like they'd been activated by some kind of suburban sleeper cell command, complete with synchronized nodding and professional-grade righteous indignation. The meeting room reeked of burnt coffee and industrial carpet cleaner, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like electronic mosquitoes having nervous breakdowns. Karen strutted to this podium carrying a laptop and what appeared to be a full multimedia presentation, because apparently destroying your neighbors now requires PowerPoint skills. Fellow residents, she announced in her most authoritative voice, we face a clear and present danger to our community's property values. She clicks to her first slide, a photo of our house that looked like it was taken by a private investigator with serious boundary issues. Here's where Karen revealed her true supervillain potential. She digitally manipulated these photos to make our property look like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Our charming 1970s ranch suddenly appeared condemned, our wildflower meadow transformed into an overgrown crack house lot, and somehow she'd photographed our tool shed from an angle that made it look structurally unsound. This is what happens when we allow non-compliance to spread like cancer through our neighborhood, Karen declared, actually using the word cancer to describe a veteran's family living peacefully on their own land. The crowd of HOA automatons nodded in perfect synchronization while nervous pen clicking from various audience members created this surreal percussion soundtrack to suburban fascism. But here's the mini twist Karen never saw coming. Trish sat in the back row wearing civilian clothes, jeans, and a Penn State sweatshirt, taking detailed notes and recording everything. Nobody recognized this quiet brunette woman as the dangerous veteran from Karen's hate presentation. Karen clicked through slide after slide of evidence, including photos of neighbors' properties that were allegedly declining due to our negative influence. She proposed an emergency ordinance requiring all properties within a half-mile radius to either join the HOA or face daily compliance inspections. Township Supervisor Tom Bradley looked like a man watching his political career circle the drain, but Karen had clearly done her homework on local power dynamics. The smell of his desperation mixed with the coffee fumes as he squirmed in his chair. After the meeting, Trish approached the township secretary with devastating innocent charm. Could I get copies of tonight's presentation? I'm new to the area and want to understand how local government works. The secretary, probably thrilled that someone actually cared about civic engagement, promised to email everything within 48 hours. That email became Karen's digital suicide note. Pennsylvania's Sunshine Act requires all municipal communications about public business to be recorded and publicly accessible, including emails, text messages, and even informal conversations if they relate to official township decisions. Municipal officials can't conduct shadow business in private communications. When fighting municipal corruption, always request all communications related to your case. The smoking guns are usually hiding in routine correspondence. The email metadata revealed a conspiracy that would make Watergate look like amateur hour. Karen and Bradley had been exchanging detailed communications for 6 months, well before we moved to the area, systematically planning this HOA expansion campaign and identifying target properties for forced inclusion. Even juicier, Bradley had accepted $12,000 in park improvement donations from Karen's HOA, all conveniently timed with various enforcement actions against non-HOA residents. The paper trail was so obvious it looked like they weren't even trying to hide the bribery. I filed an ethics complaint with the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development faster than Karen could say property values, complete with a timeline showing the corruption pattern. Karen's nuclear response arrived within 24 hours. Doug appeared at our door claiming our septic system was failing and demanding immediate connection to township water or sewer at $8,000 cost. Here's where desperation made Karen sloppy as a rookie hacker. Our house has been connected to municipal water and sewer since 1985. One phone call to the township water department produced written confirmation that we'd never had a septic system. At the next township meeting, I stood up during public comment and read this documentation aloud. Doug's face turned the color of a fire engine as 30 witnesses watched him formally withdraw the violation notice. "Must have been a clerical error," he mumbled, sounding like a kid caught cheating on a test. Karen sat in the front row, her jaw clenched so tight I thought her dental work might shatter. The nervous pen clicking had stopped. You could hear a pin drop as the entire room realized they'd just witnessed municipal corruption exposed in real time. But if I thought public humiliation would stop Karen Pemberton, I clearly underestimated the depths of HOA president psychology. When public humiliation failed to stop Karen, she decided to upgrade from neighborhood dictator to full-blown domestic terrorist. 3 days after her septic system lie exploded at the township meeting, our doorbell rang at 6:47 a.m., early enough to catch us in pajamas, late enough to avoid noise ordinance violations. Pure Karen math. Standing on our porch was Fire Marshal Roberts, looking like a man who'd lost a very unfortunate bet. Behind him sat a massive red fire department SUV with enough emergency lights to guide spacecraft, because apparently investigating household cleaning supplies now requires a full hazmat response team. "Folks, I'm really sorry about this," Roberts said, his boots making apologetic squeaking sounds on our porch. "Got a complaint about hazardous material storage. I know it's probably baloney, but I have to check for liability reasons." The anonymous complaint claimed we were storing industrial chemicals and explosive substances that posed imminent danger to the community. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust from his idling truck mixed with the sweet morning pine scent as Roberts trudged toward my garage like a condemned man walking to execution. Now here's where Karen's plan backfired beautifully. My alleged chemical weapons facility contained half a bottle of Windex, some latex paint cans from our bathroom renovation, and a bag of lawn fertilizer that couldn't harm a dandelion. Everything properly stored, labeled, and legal enough to make a safety inspector weep with joy. "This is embarrassing as hell," Roberts muttered, photographing my pathetically normal garage. "Your storage setup is better organized than most professional contractors I inspect. Hell, it's cleaner than my own garage." But then Roberts said something that made my IT contractor brain start connecting dots in a very dangerous way. "You know, this is my 4th bogus hazmat call in 6 months. Same voice every time, same lies, all targeting houses around Pinecrest Hills. Lady sounds exactly like whoever called about you. 4 false reports. I remembered reading somewhere that false emergency reports become criminal harassment when they form a pattern, and suddenly Karen's game looked a lot more serious than neighborhood drama. That afternoon, I went full detective mode, tracking down Karen's other victims. What I discovered made my blood boil with nuclear intensity. Maria Santos, a hard-working single mom whose crime was parking her plumbing van in her own driveway. Karen filed false reports claiming Maria ran an unlicensed auto shop, leading to 6 months of harassment until Maria sold her house and fled the township. Frank Mueller, an 82-year-old Korean War veteran who refused to lower his flagpole because it exceeded HOA height standards on property that wasn't even in the HOA. Karen bombarded him with false reports about electrical hazards until this war hero gave up and moved to assisted living. The Rodriguez family, guilty of installing an above-ground pool without Karen's royal permission. She called in reports about contaminated water and electrical dangers until they removed the pool and basically stopped using their own backyard. This wasn't neighborhood drama. This was systematic harassment disguised as civic concern. I remembered from my government IT work that Pennsylvania treats patterned false reports as serious crimes, especially when they cross municipal boundaries. Time to escalate this to someone with actual authority. I filed a comprehensive harassment complaint with County Sheriff Davidson, complete with victim statements and a timeline proving Karen's systematic terror campaign. The satisfying sound of justice machinery grinding into motion was almost audible. But Karen's descent into complete paranoid madness was just beginning. 2 days later, I'm installing additional security cameras when Karen storms across my lawn like she's leading a one-woman invasion, her white purse swinging with the fury of a medieval mace. "Remove those cameras now," she demands, pointing at my perfectly legal security system. "They're violating privacy laws and creating neighborhood terrorism." The sweet irony nearly choked me. Karen, who'd been photographing our property for months like some suburban spy, was now claiming my cameras violated her privacy. I explained calmly that I'd researched Pennsylvania property law extensively before installing anything. Security cameras are explicitly protected on private property as long as they don't record neighbors' private areas. My cameras pointed at my own driveway and garage, my land, my rights, my middle finger to her harassment campaign. "I don't care what you think the law says," Karen shrieks, reaching frequencies that probably summoned every dog in a 3-mile radius. "I'm filing complaints about surveillance harassment and intimidation." That evening, she made good on her threat with a formal complaint claiming our cameras created a climate of fear and violated township surveillance ordinances. Here's where Karen's complete legal ignorance became comedy gold. Her own HOA had security cameras on every street corner, and she was demanding we remove cameras from our own property while she continued photographing us from public roads. The hypocrisy was so thick you could build a fence with it. The metallic taste of victory was getting stronger, but I had no idea that Karen's next desperate move would accidentally hand us the nuclear weapon that would end this war permanently. The nuclear weapon arrived disguised as the most boring government paperwork imaginable. My right-to-know law request had been sitting in some dusty township filing cabinet for weeks, while Karen escalated her harassment campaign to federal crime levels. When that manila envelope finally landed in my mailbox, it felt heavier than it should have, like it was carrying the weight of destiny. Most of the contents were mind-numbing municipal paperwork, meeting minutes that could cure insomnia, budget reports drier than week-old toast, the usual bureaucratic sludge. But buried on page 247 of a stack thick enough to stop bullets, I found a document that made my coffee mug freeze halfway to my lips. Karen Pemberton's original property deed, dated March 15, 2018. I stared at those numbers until my eyes watered, the smell of copy machine toner and old paper filling my nostrils as my brain processed the impossible truth. Karen's pristine McMansion, the fortress from which she'd launched her suburban reign of terror, was purchased in 2018, a full year before Pinecrest Hills HOA expanded its boundaries. When Queen Karen bought her castle, she was living outside the HOA just like us. The irony hit me like a freight train carrying a cargo of pure schadenfreude. I spread documents across my desk like a detective solving the crime of the century, papers rustling with the sound of justice being served. The timeline was becoming crystal clear, and it was more beautiful than a Pennsylvania sunset. Karen hadn't been elected HOA president. She'd staged a hostile takeover after her own property got annexed against her will in 2019. The woman who'd been terrorizing us for refusing to join an HOA had originally fought tooth and nail to avoid joining herself. It was like discovering that the head of the temperance movement was a secret moonshiner. But the real atomic bomb was hidden in the county tax assessor's records, and when I found it, I actually laughed out loud in my empty office. Karen owed $47,000 in back property taxes, with penalties and interest dating back to 2020. $47,000, enough to buy a decent car or fund a small war. Township Supervisor Bradley had been deferring collection for 3 years, coincidentally right around the time Karen started her mysterious community improvement projects. I cross-referenced HOA meeting minutes with township expenditure reports, and the corruption was so obvious it was practically wearing a neon sign. Karen's improvements, the decorative street lighting, the fancy entrance monument, the professional landscaping around her property, had all been funded with township money disguised as public works projects. She'd been embezzling tax dollars to improve her own property value while dodging her tax obligations. But here's where the story gets absolutely delicious. Pennsylvania's HOA expansion laws require unanimous written consent from all affected property owners. I found documentation proving that 3 property owners, including Frank Muller, the Korean War veteran, never consented to the 2019 annexation. The entire expansion was legally void. Karen's presidency was a fraud. Her authority to harass anyone was non-existent. The beautiful irony went deeper than a Pennsylvania coal mine. If the annexation got overturned, Karen would lose all HOA variance protections. Her pool, decorative fence, and elaborate landscaping violated township codes without HOA coverage. The township would be forced to collect her massive tax debt immediately, probably triggering foreclosure on her precious McMansion. Karen needed us to join the HOA to legitimize her illegal annexation and save herself from financial ruin. Every harassment attempt, every false report, every intimidation tactic was designed to force our compliance and validate her fraudulent empire. She wasn't trying to destroy us. She was drowning and desperately trying to pull us down as her life preserver. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the satisfying tick of our grandfather clock and the distant hum of Karen's sprinkler system watering her illegally improved lawn. The neighborhood terrorist who'd been making our lives hell was actually a paper tiger propped up by corruption and desperation. Time to gather the wolves and plan our hunt. The next morning, I transformed my dining room into a war room that would make a Pentagon strategist shed tears of pure envy. Documents cascaded across our oak table like battle plans for D-Day, with color-coded folders marking different phases of what I'd mentally dubbed Operation Suburban Nuclear Strike. The rich aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the satisfying rustle of papers as I prepared to dismantle an empire built on lies, tax evasion, and really aggressive lawn care standards. My first recruit knocked on the door carrying homemade dumplings and 8 years' worth of pent-up neighborhood intelligence. Mrs. Olivia settled into my kit. Olivia chair with the quiet authority of someone who'd been watching this suburban Cold War unfold from her front window like a patient CIA analyst. "That woman destroyed 3 families before you," she said, her voice carrying the weight of witnessed injustice. "But you're different. You document everything. You fight back like my late husband fought the communists." The comparison to actual warfare wasn't lost on me, especially since Karen's tactics weren't that different from political oppression, just with better landscaping. Within 48 hours, Mrs. Olivia had connected me with Karen's previous victims, and their stories painted a picture of systematic harassment that would make a mob boss proud. Each family had faced the same playbook: false reports, bureaucratic intimidation, and relentless pressure until they broke and fled. But now they had something they'd never possessed before: a coordinated counterattack and someone crazy enough to take the fight directly to Karen's perfectly manicured doorstep. Fire Marshal Roberts became my second ally during a coffee shop meeting that felt like a scene from a spy thriller. The man was practically vibrating with suppressed rage as he slid a USB drive across the table between us. 4 false hazmat reports, 2 fake electrical emergencies, and 1 completely fabricated gas leak, he said, his voice tight with professional frustration. "She's not just wasting my time, she's endangering real emergencies when my crews are chasing her phantom disasters." The metallic click of that USB drive hitting the table sounded like ammunition being loaded. Roberts had been documenting Karen's false reports for months, building a case that would make her regret ever learning the fire department's phone number. Attorney Sarah Williams took our case pro bono after one look at our evidence, and her predatory smile suggested Karen was about to discover what happens when you mess with someone who actually understands the law. "HOA corruption is my specialty," Williams said, her pen scratching notes with the sound of justice being served on paper. "But this case reads like corruption bingo: false annexation, tax evasion, selective enforcement, abuse of municipal resources." She hit every square. Williams explained something I'd researched but never fully appreciated. Municipal annexation laws in Pennsylvania are incredibly strict, requiring unanimous written consent precisely to prevent the kind of power grab Karen had executed. When annexations are proven fraudulent, the financial consequences cascade like dominoes: back taxes, code violations, and civil liability that could bankrupt someone faster than a Vegas gambling addiction. Marcus Thompson, a retired teacher who'd been attending township meetings since before Karen learned how to spell ordinance, provided the historical context that turned our case from strong to absolutely devastating. "I've got 20 years of meeting notes," he said, producing binders that looked like they could stop bullets. "Every questionable decision, every suspicious expenditure, every time Bradley bent over backward to accommodate her demands." Thompson's documentation revealed corruption so systematic it looked like a master class in municipal graft. The patterns were beautiful in their obviousness. Every enforcement action against non-HOA residents coincided with Karen's complaints. Every township improvement mysteriously enhanced properties in her immediate vicinity. The media angle crystallized when County Herald reporter Jennifer Walsh reviewed our evidence with the excitement of a journalist who'd just stumbled onto her Pulitzer Prize story. "I've been investigating Bradley's spending irregularities for months," she said, her eyes lighting up like Christmas morning. "Your documentation provides the missing pieces that connect township corruption to HOA abuse. This isn't just neighborhood drama, this is systematic municipal fraud." But the secret weapon was Trish's military mind applied to suburban warfare. She analyzed Karen's psychological profile with the precision of someone trained to identify enemy weaknesses and exploit them with surgical efficiency. Karen's entire identity revolves around control and public image, Trish explained, marking up a neighborhood map like she was planning a tactical strike. Private setbacks she can handle, but public humiliation will trigger a complete psychological breakdown. We need maximum witnesses when she implodes. The plan that emerged was elegant in its simplicity. Force Karen to overreact in front of the largest possible audience, then reveal her corruption when she was most vulnerable and least rational. It was psychological warfare disguised as community engagement. By week's end, we'd assembled a coalition that included harassment victims, frustrated municipal employees, legal professionals, investigative journalists, and veteran advocacy groups. Karen had spent months building her empire of intimidation, but we'd constructed something far more dangerous in 7 days, a network dedicated to destroying her completely. The trap was set, baited, and ready. Now we just needed our suburban dictator to walk into it. Karen's desperation reached levels that would make a cornered rabid animal look reasonable. 3 days after our war council meeting, I stepped outside to grab the morning paper and discovered that my mailbox had been transformed into abstract sculpture, the kind created by someone wielding a baseball bat and having a complete psychological breakdown. The twisted metal gleamed in the morning sunlight like a monument to suburban rage, and I actually started laughing. Karen had just committed a federal crime, which apparently wasn't covered in her extensive research into neighborhood intimidation tactics. Destroying mailboxes brings the U.S. Postal Inspection Service into play. It's like robbing a bank to pay a parking ticket, if the bank was also run by federal agents who really hate criminals. 2 mornings later, the acrid smell of industrial herbicide hit me before I even opened our front door. Trish's prized wildflower garden, the same native plants Doug had cited as overgrown vegetation, lay wilted and dying like a botanical crime scene. The chemical stench mixed with the morning pine scent, creating this nauseating cocktail of nature versus suburban warfare. But here's where Karen's criminal mastermind plan revealed its fatal flaw. She'd used the same industrial herbicide that her lawn service applied to HOA properties. I sent soil samples to the county extension office that would match the chemical signature exactly. She'd literally signed her name to the crime in glyphosate concentrate. The masterpiece of Karen's terrorism campaign came when I discovered nails scattered across our driveway in a pattern suggesting someone had given serious thought to tire destruction methodology. The metallic glint in the dawn light looked almost artistic, if your aesthetic involved potential vehicular accidents and property damage. Now here's the mini twist that turned Karen from criminal mastermind to amateur hour. My security cameras had captured everything in high-definition glory. Her distinctive white Lexus appeared in 3 nights of footage, cruising our street like a suburban shark stalking its prey. The final night showed a dark-clothed figure emerging from her vehicle to scatter the nails before retreating like a ninja with anger management issues. But Karen's true stroke of evil genius was recruiting teenage accomplices, apparently believing that involving minors would complicate prosecution. She'd been paying neighborhood kids $20 each to vandalize our property. The smell of desperate criminal stupidity was almost overwhelming. What our HOA dictator failed to consider was that teenagers are basically walking confession machines who can't keep secrets from their parents for longer than a Happy Meal lasts. Within 24 hours of the nail incident, 3 sets of absolutely horrified parents appeared at our door, dragging their sheepish offspring behind them. The kids' statements were more devastating than Karen could have imagined. She'd approached them individually with stories about how we were dangerous outsiders threatening their peaceful community. She'd paid them to egg our house, scatter garbage in our yard, and damage our property while making it look like random teenage mischief. These parents weren't just apologetic. They were nuclear-level furious that someone had weaponized their children in a harassment campaign. One mother actually used the phrase domestic terrorist while describing Karen, which felt like validation from the universe itself. I forwarded the mailbox evidence to postal inspectors, filed insurance claims for vehicle damage, and submitted environmental samples for the garden poisoning. Karen had escalated from annoying neighbor to federal criminal, and the legal machinery grinding into motion sounded like the most beautiful symphony ever composed. But our suburban overlord's descent into complete madness was just reaching its crescendo. Her next move involved something that proved she'd lost all connection to reality. A social media campaign designed to destroy my business and Trish's reputation. Karen unleashed a barrage of fake online reviews claiming I was unstable and dangerous to work with. She flooded community Facebook groups with warnings about the problem veteran family bringing violence and instability to their peaceful neighborhood. The posts carefully avoided mentioning Trish's actual service record, instead painting her as some kind of mentally unstable combat veteran stereotype. The irony was so thick you could serve it at a dinner party. Karen was committing written defamation while demonstrating her own prejudice against veterans, creating a permanent digital record of discrimination that would make our civil rights lawsuit absolutely bulletproof. But here's where Karen's campaign achieved exactly the opposite of its intended effect. The community started researching Trish's actual military record. What they discovered made Karen's lies look not just wrong, but absolutely grotesque. Trish's Bronze Star citation described maintaining communications under enemy fire while coordinating medical evacuation. Her Silver Star came from pulling 3 wounded soldiers from a burning vehicle during a rocket attack, sustaining injuries that ended her combat service but saved 3 American lives. The community response was swift and merciless. Local VFW posts rallied to Trish's defense, neighborhood social media exploded with support for our family, and Karen's reputation transformed from concerned neighbor to person who attacks war heroes for sport. The metallic taste of approaching victory was getting stronger, but Karen had one final desperate card to play, and it would backfire more spectacularly than she could possibly imagine. Karen's final gambit proved she'd completely abandoned reality and crossed into pure criminal desperation. 1 week after her social media defamation campaign exploded in her face like a defective grenade, she appeared at my front door at 8:30 p.m. carrying a manila envelope and wearing the desperate smile of someone about to sell their soul to save their mortgage. "Jake, we need to talk," she said, her voice quivering like a guitar string about to snap. The vanilla perfume that usually announced her presence from Mars was now mixed with the unmistakable aroma of fear-induced perspiration. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she clutched that envelope like it contained the nuclear launch codes to her suburban empire. The cool evening air carried the distant sound of crickets and sprinkler systems as Karen launched into what I can only describe as the most pathetic bribery attempt in Pennsylvania history. "The township is willing to drop all violations for a simple administrative fee of $15,000, she said, her artificial sweetness tasting like saccharin mixed with battery acid. "Consider it a community contribution to avoid any future complications." Now here's where Karen's desperation made her confess to crimes I hadn't even suspected. She detailed exactly how the township would systematically destroy us if we refused her generous extortion offer. Daily inspections, emergency violations, bureaucratic torture designed to drive us away or bankrupt us into submission. She was basically describing a protection racket while sitting on my living room couch. But the real moment that changed everything came when Karen completely broke down and started begging like her life depended on it. The confident HOA dictator dissolved before my eyes, revealing a financially desperate woman whose entire world was crumbling faster than a house built on quicksand. "You don't understand," she whispered, actual tears streaming down her face and ruining what was probably $200 worth of makeup. "I owe $47,000 in back taxes. If the HOA expansion gets overturned, I lose everything. My house, my presidency, my control over this neighborhood. You have to join the HOA to make the annexation legitimate." The beautiful irony hit me like divine revelation. Karen needed us to validate her illegal power grab to save herself from complete financial destruction. Every harassment tactic, every false report, every intimidation attempt had been designed to force our compliance and legitimize her fraudulent authority. She wasn't trying to destroy us. She was drowning and desperately trying to drag us down as her life preserver. My voice recorder app captured every incriminating word as Karen offered to split proceeds from an insurance fraud scheme involving fake storm damage and inflated repair estimates. She detailed kickbacks to contractors, falsified inspection reports, and systematic theft of township funds. The woman was literally confessing to multiple felonies while crying on my furniture. Karen's nuclear option arrived 3 days later when Doug appeared with a condemnation notice claiming our house was structurally unsafe and required immediate evacuation. The notice demanded professional inspection at our expense, with demolition strongly recommended if repairs exceeded 50% of property value. From my previous research into municipal corruption cases, I recognize this as the classic demolition scam. Condemn property at below market value, arrange township acquisition through eminent domain, then allow cronies to purchase and redevelop for massive profits. Karen was essentially trying to steal our house through legal terrorism. But here's where Karen's scheme revealed its fatal flaw. She demanded police presence for the safety inspection, apparently believing that law enforcement would intimidate us into compliance. She'd coordinated multiple township agencies to respond simultaneously, creating the exact public spectacle that would become her spectacular downfall. The morning of Karen's planned property seizure, our driveway looked like a federal disaster response. County building inspectors, environmental safety officers, fire marshals, and 3 police patrol cars created a convoy that could invade Luxembourg. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust from idling engines mixed with morning dew as neighbors gathered to witness what they thought would be our humiliation. Karen arrived, dressed like she was accepting a Nobel Prize, carrying legal documents she claimed gave her authority over our property. Her white Lexus gleamed in the morning sunlight as she strutted toward our house like a general reviewing conquered territory. County Building Inspector Martinez conducted the most thorough structural examination since the house was built, finding 0 violations. Environmental Inspector Rodriguez certified all systems safe and properly maintained. Fire Marshal Roberts, our secret ally, confirmed no safety hazards whatsoever, his satisfied grin barely concealed as he filed his report. Every single agency confirmed that Karen's emergency condemnation was based on completely false reports, creating an official record of harassment that would make criminal prosecution absolutely inevitable. But Karen's masterpiece of self-destruction was yet to come. As the inspectors packed their equipment and neighbors began dispersing, she spotted Trish emerging from our house in her full army dress uniform, preparing for a veterans ceremony later that morning. The sight of those ribbons and medals triggered something primal in Karen's bigoted brain, and she began screaming demands for Trish's immediate arrest. The final battle was about to begin, and Karen had no idea she was about to face the most humiliating defeat in suburban warfare history. The scene that unfolded in our driveway at 9:47 a.m. on that crisp Tuesday morning will forever be etched in my memory as the most spectacular collapse of suburban tyranny ever witnessed by human eyes. Multiple agency vehicles had transformed our peaceful property into what looked like a federal disaster response. County inspection trucks, fire department SUVs, and 3 police patrol cars with their diesel engines rumbling like mechanical predators circling wounded prey. Karen stood beside her pristine white Lexus like Napoleon surveying Waterloo, designer purse clutched in her perfectly manicured hands, wearing a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. The morning dew sparkled on our lawn like diamonds as neighbors emerged from houses along the entire street, phones already recording what they expected to witness our public execution at the hands of municipal authority. Then our front door opened and everything changed. Trish stepped into the morning sunlight wearing her Army Class A dress uniform, the formal military attire reserved for ceremonies, funerals, and moments that demand absolute reverence. Every ribbon was aligned with mathematical precision, every medal positioned according to regulations written in blood and sacrifice across decades of American military tradition. Her silver Lieutenant Colonel Eagles caught the morning light like beacons of genuine authority, and her polished black shoes reflected the sky as she walked with the measured cadence of someone who'd faced actual enemies in actual combat zones. The sight of Trish in full military regalia triggered something absolutely primal and ugly in Karen's diseased psyche. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred as she pointed her finger like she was identifying a war criminal at the Nuremberg trials. "I don't care what fake medals she's wearing," Karen shrieked at Police Sergeant Martinez, her voice reaching frequencies that probably violated physics and summoned every dog within a 5-mile radius. "She's violating my township ordinances, and I demand you arrest her right now." The entire neighborhood fell dead silent except for the mechanical clicking of dozens of phone cameras capturing what would become the most viral moment in our township's recorded history. the acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixed with Karen's overpowering vanilla perfume, creating this surreal atmospheric cocktail of bureaucratic intimidation and impending breakdown. "Those ribbons are just costume jewelry from some army surplus store," she screamed, spittle flying from her lips like a rabid animal in its final moments. "Military people think they're above community standards. I'm the HOA president, and I have legal authority over this entire area." That's when Police Sergeant Martinez really looked, truly, professionally looked, at Trish's uniform. His trained law enforcement eyes moved methodically from her combat infantry badge to her bronze star with valor device to the silver star that caught the morning light like a beacon of genuine American heroism. I watched his expression transform from professional courtesy to something approaching religious reverence. Without hesitation, without consultation, without any regard whatsoever for Karen's hysterical demands, Sergeant Martinez snapped to rigid military attention and rendered the crispest, most respectful salute I've ever witnessed in civilian life. The sound of his leather duty belt creaking in the sudden sacred silence was audible to every single person present. Officers Thompson and Rodriguez immediately followed suit, their synchronized tribute creating a moment so profoundly respectful that even the morning breeze seemed to pause in honor. Karen's confident smugness evaporated like steam rising from hot asphalt in summer. Her mouth dropped open in complete, total bewilderment as she stared at 3 police officers showing the exact opposite of the compliance she'd arrogantly demanded. The confusion on her face was so absolute, so devastating to her worldview, that she actually stumbled backward on her expensive heels, nearly tumbling onto our gravel driveway like a broken marionette. "What are you doing?" she screamed, her voice cracking like adolescent vocal cords under stress. "Why are you saluting her? I called you. I'm the one with authority here. Arrest this terrorist!" The crowd of neighbors gasped audibly at the word terrorist applied to a decorated combat veteran, and I could literally feel the mood shift from curiosity to outrage. Sergeant Martinez lowered his salute slowly, deliberately, and fixed Karen with a look that could have frozen molten steel. When he spoke, his voice carried the institutional weight of respect that spans generations of American military service. "Ma'am, that silver star represents pulling 3 wounded American soldiers from a burning vehicle while under direct enemy fire in Afghanistan. Lieutenant Colonel Rothschild saved 3 American lives while risking her own in service to this country." The crowd pressed closer, phones capturing every word as the full scope of Karen's moral bankruptcy became crystal clear to everyone present. She had just called a decorated war hero a terrorist for standing peacefully on her own property. That's when I stepped forward with my manila envelope and delivered the line that would end Karen's reign of terror forever. "Officers, would you like to hear Mrs. Pemberton explain in her own words how she's been taking bribes and systematically harassing veteran families?" I pressed play. Karen's voice filled the morning air like a confession at Judgment Day. The metallic click of handcuffs closing around her wrists was the sweetest sound in the history of suburban justice. "Game over, Karen." The immediate aftermath of Karen's arrest felt like watching the Berlin Wall crumble in slow motion. As the patrol car disappeared down our tree-lined street carrying our former neighborhood dictator toward her date with justice, the crowd of witnesses erupted in spontaneous applause that echoed through the crisp morning air like church bells announcing freedom. The legal demolition of Karen Pemberton was swift and merciless. Within 6 months, she'd pled guilty to attempted bribery, filing false reports, criminal harassment, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. 18 months in state prison, $25,000 in fines, and a criminal record that would follow her until the end of time. Watching her orange jumpsuit shuffle into county lockup on the evening news felt like Christmas morning wrapped in 4th of July fireworks. Township Supervisor Tom Bradley resigned before the state ethics investigation could formally destroy him, his political career ending faster than a mayfly's lifespan. Doug Pemberton cooperated with prosecutors to avoid joining his wife in prison, receiving 3 years probation and permanent banishment from any municipal enforcement position. The man who'd harassed us for months was now legally prohibited from writing parking tickets at a church carnival. The county officially overturned the illegal 2019 HOA annexation, declaring it void due to Karen's procedural violations and forged consent documents. Her entire suburban empire collapsed like a sandcastle at high tide, freeing her former subjects to live without residential terrorism. Property values actually increased once families could move to the area without fear of HOA Gestapo tactics. But the sweetest justice came at Karen's foreclosure auction. Her McMansion sold for exactly enough to cover back taxes, legal fees, and victim restitution, leaving her with nothing but memories and a felony record. The new owners, a young Army family with 3 kids, turned her pristine lawn into a vegetable garden and playground that would have given Karen a fatal stroke. The neighborhood healing began with Mrs. Olivia organizing a block party that felt like VE Day celebrations. The smell of grilled burgers mixed with her homemade dumplings as families who'd lived in fear for years finally felt safe enough to laugh together. Children played in yards that had been silent under Karen's surveillance, their voices creating the soundtrack of a community reborn. Trish transformed our victory into something bigger than personal revenge. She established the Veterans Property Rights Defense Fund, providing legal assistance to military families facing HOA discrimination nationwide. The fund's first case involved a Marine family whose HOA tried to ban their service dog. Watching Trish demolish those bureaucrats with legal precision was almost as satisfying as Karen's arrest. The Defense Fund partnered with major veteran organizations, creating a rapid response network that could fight housing discrimination anywhere in America. The annual fundraiser became our community's favorite tradition, raising over $100,000 last year while bringing together military families, lawyers, and civilians who understood that freedom sometimes requires defending it in suburban America. My IT consulting business tripled after the news coverage, proving that standing up to corruption was excellent marketing. More importantly, our marriage grew stronger through facing adversity together. Apparently, the couple that fights suburban dictators together stays together. The ripple effects spread like wildfire. Pennsylvania legislature strengthened HOA expansion laws preventing future annexation fraud. Other states followed suit after our story went viral. The County Veterans Office created a dedicated HOA discrimination hotline, helping dozens of military families fight their own suburban battles. 6 months later, we received a letter that made Trish cry happy tears. Maria Santos, the single mother Karen had driven away, was buying a house 2 townships over, finally feeling safe enough to put down roots again. Frank Mueller's daughter sent photos of her dad's new flagpole at assisted living, flying higher than ever. These small victories felt bigger than defeating an entire army. The best part? Karen's replacement was a retired Air Force colonel who ran HOA meetings like actual democracy instead of personal fiefdoms. The neighborhood Facebook page transformed from propaganda platform to genuine community resource where people helped instead of harassed each other. Every morning I step outside to collect the newspaper and breathe in the sweet scent of Trish's wildflower garden, those same native plants that started this whole war. The sound of our flag snapping in the breeze reminds me that some battles are worth fighting, especially when bullies think they can intimidate heroes. Here's what I need from you. Drop your own HOA nightmare story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else fighting similar battles. And smash that subscribe button for Karen stories if you want more tales of ordinary people destroying corrupt systems with nothing but determination and good documentation. Next week, how a retired teacher used obscure zoning laws to expose $1 million Airbnb tax fraud that reached the mayor's office. Trust me, that explosion makes Karen look like amateur hour.